Today, I want to talk about fear. Now, fear can run your life if you let it. Fear can take things that you like doing and it can make them extremely unbearable. Fear can keep you in situations, relationships, friendships, jobs that you don't like, and it can just keep you stuck there for years. Fear can keep you from doing the things that you know that you are meant to do in life. I know that I suffer from fear. I have an emotional support dog right next to me, right? Fear is something that we all experience. And I think that fear is different for everyone. Everyone has different fears, but fundamentally at the base of those fears is the same thing. It's an assumption about the future. It's an assumption about something that might happen, but probably won't. How often is the pain that you think is going to come from something actually worse than the pain when it happens? Like, think about going to the dentist. I know a lot of people who will not go to the dentist. They do not want to go to the dentist because they have all this fear around the pain of going to the dentist. But all of that pain that you spend thinking about going to the dentist is still pain. You could have just went to the dentist, faced that fear, and then not dealt with all of that fake fear. There's this great Mark Twain quote. I think it goes, "I've lived through some terrible things in my life, some of which have actually happened." I think that quote says so much in just one simple sentence. It's saying that bad things do happen to in life. Everyone has bad things happen to them. You can be the richest person, you can be the poorest person. Everyone suffers. Everyone goes through trauma. Everyone goes through suffering. Everyone goes through pain at some point. You may have not experienced it yet, but it happens at some point. It is a part of life, and a beautiful part of life if you look at it from the right perspective. But it is a part of life nonetheless. And then there's the other pain. The pain that comes from us thinking that bad things may happen at some point in the future, and then they don't happen, right? They don't always happen. Most of the bad things that we think are going to happen don't happen. I have plenty of things like this in my own life. I have this terrible fear that I'm going to lose my hair, and I laugh as I say it because it makes no sense because no one in my family is bald or losing their hair. Even people who are significantly older than me, and I have no evidence of having lost my hair or that I'm losing my hair, yet for some reason I still fear that could be the case. So with any fear that you have, remember that it's an assumption, and it's been programmed into you from something that happened in your life, right? It's most likely something that happened in the past that's developed this kind of fear in you. One of the things that I've always feared since I was a kid was getting in trouble, which as an adult manifests itself completely differently as when you're a child, yet it still has that same feeling inside. I can't explain it, but that feeling that, oh my God, I'm in trouble for something. It's like the same exact feeling I had when I was a kid, and yet it happens as an adult. And the way that I learned to deal with it was I developed avoidance around this. In many different situations, it's not particular to just one situation. And I remember being a kid and getting a bad report card. And for the first time, having to rationalize, what was I going to do about this? Was I going to show it to my parents? I knew they were going to be mad. They were mad. It wasn't an assumption that time. Sometimes fear isn't an assumption. Sometimes you're right, but that's usually not the case. So I had this bad report card, and I knew they were going to be mad at me. So I decided to hide it. And I remember years ago making that decision. And it actually worked for a couple of days. Eventually my teacher caught my parents picking me up one day. And they said, "Hey, did you see your daughter's report card?" And my parents were like, no, what report card? And, a conversation later, I was in a lot of trouble and I had to show them the report card. But I think there was a part of me that learned that if I'm scared I'm going to be in trouble for something, I can at the very least delay being in trouble by not facing the situation. And I think that's something that I have carried into my adult life, and it's something that I am actively trying to work through on a daily basis. That's partially why I make these videos, because I want to talk to you about the things that I'm struggling with and how I'm dealing with them, in hopes that you can also benefit from this. And so, the only way that I've realized as an adult to handle fear and to get through fear is unfortunately just to go through it. Just do the thing that you are afraid of. That is the only way, I think, to deal with fear. And fear, I've found, can be a very powerful entity unto itself. I have no evidence of this, but I have a theory. And my theory is that anything that exists wants to exist more. So it's why populations grow. It's why mold grows. It's why bugs populate, right? Anything that exists, I think it has just this inherent need and this inherent want to duplicate itself, to grow, essentially, right? I think we all as people want to grow, and that's a positive thing. But there are also things that want to grow that are negatives. And I think that once you have fear in your mind, in your head, in your psyche, if you don't resolve it, it's going to grow and it's going to keep growing. And the bigger it gets, the harder it's going to be to just deal with it. Unfortunately, I wish there was an easier advice. I wish I could say run. I wish I could say buy this book and you'll never be afraid again. That's not the case. The case is that you just have to go into the fear. Whether it's the fear of talking to someone about something, whether it's the fear of doing something, whether it's the fear of public speaking, that's a big fear. I think there's a list of fears. If you Google it, you'll see it. And I think that's like in the top 3 fears of all Americans is public speaking. I mean, I think it's higher than cancer. Like, public speaking is a huge fear for people. And I think that says a lot about fear itself, because in public speaking is what I was talking about before, is the assumption that something bad may happen, that these people may reject you, that they might not agree with you. But if you just stay strong onto yourself and be true to yourself, which is hard to do, that's an entire other video, and then you go on stage, generally nothing happens. Nothing bad happens. Usually. Occasionally bad things happen. But usually it goes well for most people. I have a class that I teach that involves a lot of public speaking, and a lot of the students are very afraid in the beginning. But what they learn is it usually goes well. Even if there's a few people in the audience who don't completely agree with you, big deal. That's life. So what? You know, we move on. We have to just come to terms with people who have differences than us. That's not a big deal. And I think if you even said to people up front, hey, you're going to make this speech and 1 or 2 people are not going to agree with you, but nothing else bad is going to happen, and I can guarantee that, I think that would put a lot of people at ease, because most people are okay with being disagreed with. But the thing with fear is that fear is completely irrational. Fear doesn't make sense, right? It makes sense in that something at some point hurt you. Something at some point developed this fear inside of you. Chances are the fear that you have is individualized. It's individual to you and your past and situations that have happened in your life. And it can tell you a lot about yourself, and it can tell you a lot about what the next step is in your life. I have a lot of fear about making videos. Not necessarily that people are going to judge it, but that I can make them better. Or it's not going to do well and it's going to throw off the algorithm and then no one's going to watch my videos ever again and I'm going to tank my channel. Or I'm afraid that I'm going to say something that I'm going to regret later, or I'm going to say something accidentally about someone that I know in real life and then they're going to be mad at me. Again, people being mad at me. I have that fear. So I think a lot of facing fear is acknowledging the fear and figuring out what the fear is. And that can be a very easy thing, or it could be extremely difficult. There's fears that I have that are very easy to articulate. Like the fear of losing my hair, very easy to articulate. It's very irrational. I have, like I said before, no evidence for it, yet It's a very easy to articulate fear. Yet other fears that I have, I've noticed they don't make themselves visible very easily, and sometimes they hide as fears of other things. And I think that happens when we aren't ready to face the things that we're really afraid of, because sometimes it's easier to say to ourselves that we're afraid of something that we're not really afraid of, so we could get a little further into doing the thing that we're really afraid of. So I know that I sometimes have fear of, like, very simply, like, leaving the house. But it's not a fear of leaving the house. It's not an agoraphobia. It's not a fear of going to just any place outside of the house. It ends up coming up in particular situations in which I am putting a lot on the line. I'm putting a lot of emphasis on wanting a situation to go well. Like, say it's going on a date, right? Maybe I don't want to admit to myself that I want things to go really well with this person because I like this person. But I'll say to myself that, I have anxiety in public. I have anxiety going out into the world or going to certain places, but that's not really true. It's just what I have to tell myself to get to the next layer of fear. So fear is sometimes, it's like an onion. Sometimes you have to peel back multiple layers before you can even figure out what it is that you're really afraid of. If you have some idea of what you're afraid of, that's great. Just start there. Do that thing and notice how you feel. And if you feel afraid when you're doing that thing, then that's the thing you're afraid of. But if you feel okay doing that thing, then chances are you have to dig a little deeper to figure out what the fear actually is. And like I said before, there's no easy way to handle your fears. You just have to do them. And I think the way in which you handle your fear can be very individualized. Like I said before, public speaking is a fear for many people. And it's easy to say, just go on stage, just talk to people, and then the fear goes away. But it's not that easy. And there are tips to help along the way once you figure out what that individual fear is. So for public speaking, what I tell people is, if you're afraid of public speaking, take that fear and try to translate it into excitement, in that you're excited about what you're going to say, because then the audience will like that. And the audience will be engaged with you. They'll be excited with you. They'll want to hear what you have to say if you're excited to tell it to them. So you can also just breathe, slow down, ground yourself in the moment. Just say, okay, where am I? How do I feel? Let me feel my body. Let me breathe for a second. Let me not dissociate from this situation. Let me just be in it. Let me just sit in the fear and handle this moment by moment. And chances are it goes away. And that's kind of the funny thing that I've noticed about public speaking, because I would get very nervous speaking in front of crowds. And I still do in some circumstances. But I've realized many times that when I do it, once I'm up there and once it starts going well and once I kind of ground myself and know where I'm going with what I'm saying, it goes so much easier. And the other thing for public speaking is prepare. If you're afraid about a speech and you just didn't prepare, well, that's a different fear, right? And that's something easy. That's something you can actually do that will help the fear go away. That's actually something rational, right? If you're afraid to do something and you didn't prepare to do it, well, then just prepare. That's easy. And reframing that fear can be one of the most important steps towards moving past the fear itself. Taking that fear and understanding that there's a lot of energy behind this fear. Chances are, whatever it is that I'm about to do, whatever it is that I'm afraid of, is very meaningful to me. Like, most people aren't afraid of, say, tying their shoes, right? I'm sure there's a phobia for that somewhere, and I don't mean any offense to that person, but for little things like that, people aren't afraid, right? Most people aren't afraid of charging their phone, right? Because it's a pretty meaningless thing. It's important, you need to do it, but there's not a lot riding on the line, right? You just plug in your phone and you charge it. You just tie your shoes and they're tied, and that's it. You move on with life. It's a simple thing. But the things that you're afraid of will tell you what it is that's important to you. And using that fear and facing that fear can help you get to the next stage of your life. And being on the other side of that fear is such a relief. It's such a relief. And one of the things that I found is really helpful with fear is just talking about it. Sometimes you can't face the fear directly, and sometimes just talking about it is enough. Sometimes if you just talk about it with someone that you trust, someone that you know cares for you and isn't going to make the situation worse, it sometimes helps you resolve it without even doing it. I've noticed that's happened to me a few times where I've talked about some sort of fear that I had that was pretty irrational. I can't think of an example, otherwise I'd give you one. And I talked about it with someone, and then it just kind of disappeared. It just kind of went away in time without me even doing that much more work. So if you haven't talked about something that you're afraid of, talk about it. Put it in the comments below. Talk about it with your friends. Chances are there's other people that also have this fear. And a fear that's behind most fears is that you're alone and you're weird and you're the only one dealing with this and it's strange and you're going to be outcast for it. But the chances are that is not the case. Most fears are pretty common. You know, at the base of them is the fear of being rejected, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of failure, right? It's all kind of the same thing at the end of the day. After you face your fears, it's very important that you don't just lose sight of that and let that go. Actually celebrate it. Actually talk about it. Actually make content about it. Write about it. Put it in the comments below. Go face your fears and then tell us about them. It'll help me know that I'm actually doing something with this channel. I would appreciate that greatly. Thank you. So face your fears and then write about them. Talk about it with people. It'll help ingrain in you the fact that you had this fear, you faced this fear, nothing bad happened, and you're ready for it if it comes up again. It's just reinforcement. Reinforcement training is very important. It works with humans. It works with dogs as well. One of the things that worked with Honey when she was a baby, when she was a pup, and she was afraid of things, she would be afraid of little things. She was afraid of mirrors. She just didn't know what they were. She was afraid of toys that had blinking lights on them. She was afraid of all sorts of irrational things. And one of the most important things that I did with her was exposure. I did exposure with her in that I exposed her to the thing that she was afraid of, but I did it in a very calm and a loving way. I didn't force it in her face. I would show her that I was using the toy. I would show her the toy without the lights. I would show her the toy with the lights. I would show her the mirror. I would put her in front of the mirror and pet her and give her treats. And I would just find a way to expose her to the thing that she was afraid of in a way that was enjoyable and pleasant. So if you can do that with yourself, if you can give yourself treats as you are facing your fears, hey, what the heck? That's cool. Why not, right? Why can't we have treats all the time? I like treats. Honey likes treats. I am all for more treats. So facing your fears is very important. It will help you in life. It will turn you into a beast. After you do it, you will feel so much better. You will level up. It will make your life amazing. Face your fears. Talk about it with your friends. Let's make it more common to do that, because what do people talk about? People talk about the silliest things. People talk about TV shows and people at work and politics. I mean, think about how much better the world would be if we talked less about politics and less about these things and more about our fears, because we would relate to each other. And then those issues that end up in politics and foreign relations and all of those things would actually be getting solved in these smaller groups, which is so much healthier for people, and how I think things happened before society got to where it is now. So face your fears, subscribe to my channel, because I would love that. Don't be afraid. You can subscribe. Nothing bad will happen. I promise you. Maybe you'll get notifications you don't want, or you'll see my face more. That could be bad. I don't know. Could be bad. Could be good. I don't know. Depends on how you feel. So subscribe to the channel. Face your fears. Put your fears in the comments below. And yeah, live your life.